Pronto? Si sente? No? Ecco, ora sì, grazie.
Un saluto al prefetto.
Sì, la faccio accomodare subito. La facciamo accomodare? Inversini. Inversini. Signora, può accomodarsi un secondo? La ringrazio. Well, good morning to everyone. My name is Almo Farina. Almo for all, okay? And it's a great pleasure to see you here in La Spezia. It's not my town, it's not my city. I'm living in a small village, 45 kilometers in the interior part of this territory. But culturally and spiritually, La Spezia is a big attraction for people living around. So this is a small ceremony just to introduce the president of the Accademia, Professor Giuseppe Benelli, Professor Marcello Barbieri, of course, that you know as the patron of our code biology. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Sua Eccellenza il Prefetto di La Spezia, that is in terms of Dottoressa Inversini, and is the higher national authority in La Spezia, because she represents the Italian government. So now the introduction will be in Italian by Professor Benelli. As you like, you introduce, lei può parlare come crede, in inglese o in italiano. And,
Okay.
Prego, Giuseppe.
Un saluto particolare da parte dell'Accademia Giovanni Capellini della Spezia. È un'accademia di scienze, perché chi ha dato lo spunto a questa accademia è stato un grande scienziato. Ha creato nel mondo la geologia, quando ancora non si insegnava all'università. Era chiamata scienze geografiche. Lui, diventato professore di scienze geografiche a Bologna, la più prestigiosa università italiana, l'unica università che avesse uno statuto speciale che ha mantenuto fino al 1911, l'università su cui ha investito l'Italia unita, l'università che doveva essere il modello culturale dell'Italia nel mondo. Ecco, Capellini è stato un grande scienziato, un grande ricercatore, e ha voluto che nascesse qui alla Spezia questa Accademia di Scienze, Accademia Lunigianese di Scienze. Ecco perché quando il professor Almo Farina, che è un nostro accademico, ha proposto questo convegno internazionale sui codici genetici, è stato per me motivo di grande soddisfazione accettare questa proposta, perché è nello spirito più autentico della storia centenaria di questa accademia e in particolare, lasciatemi dire, nella storia culturale scientifica della Spezia. La Spezia, con la nascita del grande arsenale voluto da Cavour, con la nascita del grande porto militare che ha prodotto le più belle navi che si sono viste nel Mediterraneo, la Spezia ha creato un centro studi di altissimo livello. Stiamo celebrando i 150 anni della nascita di Guglielmo Marconi. Marconi non avrebbe potuto fare gli esperimenti che ha fatto senza il centro studi dell'arsenale della Spezia. È l'ammiraglio Brin che lo accoglie qui alla Spezia, gli consente alla fine dell'Ottocento, 1897-98, sperimentazioni fondamentali che l'hanno portato poi al premio Nobel nel 1909. Quindi la Spezia è felice di poter accogliere studiosi che vengono da tutto il mondo nello spirito più autentico della ricerca scientifica. Quella dei codici genetici è un tema di gran fascino, di grande interesse, ma anche di grandi novità. Credo che il progresso scientifico stia facendo passi da gigante. Quella che è stata la rivoluzione informatica, la rivoluzione culturale dei giochi linguistici di Wittgenstein ha creato un sapere e un metodo conoscitivo che non consente soltanto di comunicare a distanza le proprie ricerche, ma che consente sviluppi nuovi, affascinanti e, lasciatemi dire, imprevedibili. Auguro quindi giornate di lavoro intense, proficue, e sono sicuro che questo soggiorno alla Spezia sarà nel vostro ricordo indimenticabile. Grazie.
Welcome to everybody. Congratulations to Accademia Capellini for this very, very interesting Congress. I hope you will have interesting but also days here, but also I hope you can enjoy the beautiful landscape of La Spezia, Five Lands and so on. What to say? I am here to learn. I feel so small when I think to science and to the world of science that I don't know, I have forgotten because I study law. So congratulations to everybody, because I think that having a dream is very important in life, and every science has a big dream. So have a nice day here, and good job, good work.
Okay, I think that this opening ceremony is at hand, and now we are formally open the plenary session. Is a plenary, no other session. And I asked to Marcello to chair my presentation. Okay, we have 30 minutes, 25 minutes plus 5 minutes for discussion. Okay, 25 più 5 minuti di discussione. Okay, there is some flexibility, but I ask to everyone to be precise in the timing. Okay, me too. Okay. I have to ask you the permission for the streaming transmission. Every speaker should say yes or no because of the other stream. Okay? When you arrive here, you say yes or no. No? We close all the light. Okay? Okay.
No, il microfono dicevo.
I microfoni
Il
sono
tuo microfono.
Sì, può chiudere tutto che io inizio. Prego. Solo le luci.
In genere è meglio spegnere quello che non si usa.
Adesso spegno troppo. I'm searching my stopwatch. It's essential to stay on time. So, the title, I have changed the title of my presentation, but the content is more or less the same. The role of ecological codes in the transformation perspective of ecological codes. This is my motive. And the second part, I will try to enter in the theory about these codes. Natural and human landscape are a continuous evolution of forms, aggregations, and processes that can be observed at various spatial and temporal scales. The relationship between man and nature is guided by ecological codes. This is a very important concept. The ecological codes not only modify social structures, individual and collective behaviors, but create a new landscape configuration, which in turn provide the substrate for the settlement of new biological species. For instance, invasive species like Luteoleotis find new habitat in the modification of the codes. So the ecological codes associated to every new human activity are considered the main drivers in the recent evolution of the Lunigiana landscape, and in particular La Spezia Gulf. This is a figure of the Lunigiana, Lunensis ager. This is a mountainous region. Lunigiana is an historical region, the territory of Luni Bishop, inhabited since prehistoric time. You find on the left the statue stelae that you find exposed in San Giorgio Castle, close. The Lunigiana has mountain ranges, Tosco-Emiliano Apennines, the Ligurian Apennines coastal range, the Alpi Apuane important for marble, and three main rivers, Aulella River, Magra River, and Vara River, and divided in two provinces and in two regions, Liguria and Tuscany. La Spezia, in the middle of 18th century, was really a small city. You see here the old map of La Spezia. And this is a paint of more or less like a natural, more or less natural Gulf. But in a paint of the middle of 19th century, La Spezia is still a small city with an important seafront that you can find now, still now. And since the middle of 19th, dramatic changes occurred in La Spezia Gulf, as Giuseppe Benelli said. Is the construction of military arsenal from this small city change abruptly in a few decades became a large industrial and commercial maritime city. This is the location of a military arsenal on the western side of the Gulf, and this is the breakwater, is a giant dike, giant for us, not for Dutch people, but for Italian people, it's a giant dike of 2,000 meters long and 13 meter high and large 50 meter, and it's been built few years after the building of the arsenal. This description could be create question for you, why you are explaining these things. Because every changes occurred in La Spezia has been originated by new ecological codes. And this is, La Spezia is a gulf rich of underground water. This is San Giorgio Castle that is a few meters far from here. This is the main church of La Spezia, and this is Vesprugula. It was a lake, a freshwater lake, where now we have the arsenal, more or less. And Vesprugula, this is the name of this karst spring, still remain and create a problem to urban stability of buildings. This is the military arsenal, very important between the two worlds. But this is not the only change occurred in La Spezia. In La Spezia, we have a huge shipyard, very important. The best ship have been produced in La Spezia. The last ship is the aircraft carrier San Marco. But in La Spezia, we had also a strong, large oil refinery for more or less 60 years. Due to the heavy pollution, has been removed and the area restored. And now there is a big, huge commercial center, and all the area has been reclaimed. Contemporarily, La Spezia became an important container port. In 2023, 1 year ago, about 1 million of containers have been shipped from La Spezia. And one of the last modifications of this Gulf is the construction of a Porto Mirabello that now has 1,000 more moorings and space for 100 super yachts. Despite all this modification, the seafront has been maintained like in the old picture, more or less this. And we can see, I hope tomorrow, the seafront and the garden as a very beautiful recreational urban area. Despite these industrial settlements, we have also a mussel and oyster farms, very important in this area, for this area. Tomorrow in the dinner, we will test the mussels produced exactly on the left side of the wave dike. This is the mussel settlement farm, okay, very important. But in the last year, La Spezia has been discovered by the cruise tourism. And now you can see a big ship at the dock. And this has transformed specifically La Spezia and Cinque Terre in a hotspot for mass tourism. And La Spezia and Cinque Terre, so La Spezia is the hub and Cinque Terre is the location, are interested a mix of what I say allochthonous and autochthonous ecological codes that have created new economies. Millions of people are visiting Cinque Terre and La Spezia. But considering the Lunigiana, the territory on the back of La Spezia, changes of ecological codes along the coast impacted on the cultural landscape, causing in a few years, since 50 onward, agricultural abandonment and depopulation associated to disappearance of several ecotopes. I have to introduce very, very shortly what I mean for cultural landscape. A cultural landscape is a sequence of ecotopes in which patterns and processes are the results of a long period of human interference on competitive terms with the natural dynamics. The ecotopes are built step by step by the adaptation of ecological codes. Is an example of ecotopes. The choice of plants, the position of the plants, and the farming regime have been related strictly with the environmental conditions. This is concept of ecotopes. So this is an amazing example of 1 yard ecotope in Cinque Terre. The combination of the terracing and exposition has created such an amazing landscape and mosaic of ecotopes that demands a lot of human work. But the Lunigiana is an example of earth stewardship. That is the results of ecological codes that have produced specific ecotopes. This is one of my first shot in 70. It's all women that was controlling the underground, maintaining open the underground, and creating in this sweet chestnut orchard an ecotope in which domestic and wild biodiversity has been expressed at highest level. All this has disappeared, unfortunately. And the rapid decline of human stewardship, and stewardship is an important word in code biology. I suggest that this term must be used more and more in our perspective. The rapid decline of human stewardship has condemned the cultural landscape to a progressive disappearance. And now we have euphorbia, erica, or butus as invasive species covering the past terracings. Changes occurred in animal communities. From we assist to a community turnover of open habitat species like Carduelis or Saxicola, the two species that you can see here, with other species that are living in dense shrubby areas like Leiotis lutea or Sylvia atricapilla. And we have also contemporarily a rapid decline in human stewardship. The rapid decline of human stewardship has created ruins in terraced or in dry stone walls, or in oratory, in religious, small countryside churches. And wildfires have consequences of land abandonment. Also, wildfires are managed, driven by ecological codes. And the new paradigm of natural conservation has and associated codes had an impact on cultural landscape. So we have many parks, protected area, and these have created a new biodiversity. It's more iconic diversity. And on this point, we should require a reflection about, discussion about, if we like more wolf or a butterfly. And this is a matter of discussion in conservationism. But now, after this very, very short and imperfect presentation of La Spezia Gulf and Lunigiana abandonment, now I enter more specifically in a theoretical approach. This has been my homage to this land, to introduce you from a scientific point of view Lunigiana. This is my homage to this land. Now I enter in the details. Marcello, I am following the chronometer, so no worry. I stop in due time. Okay, you don't need to kill me. Okay. Now I introduce very shortly the vivoscape concept. That is the epistemological evolved form of the Umwelt. I published this idea, a very simple idea. Until recent time, we have distinguished biological species from the environment. Very simple. I am a biological species, and this is my environment. With the vivoscape concept, I am an ecological species, and I am composed by flesh, neurons, and air, and some part of this building. When I move with my environment. And this has been created thanks to the contribution of the ecological codes that are relational mechanisms. So ecological codes, I define ecological code, but you can discuss, of course, because this is just the idea, belong to neural codes, after strong discussion with Marcello, category after the integration with factors originated by the environmental context. Some ecological codes are fixed in the genome, like the codes used by spider to create a web. Every spider creates the same web. And on the other side, some codes are ephemeral and culturally transmitted inside population, like the habit of blue teeth to open the milk bottle that has been spread in United Kingdom in very short time. Ecological codes are relational mechanisms with which a species come in contact with the mutability of an external environment, attributing specific meaning to derive a vital advantage for it. One splendid example is of ecological code is the woggle dance of honeybee. Direction, distance, abundance, quality of foods are decoded by the movements, the behavior, the patterns created by a dancing worker, and all other honeybees are looking for this. But codes are transmitted culturally also in animals, like in Macaca fuscata, that a population has learned, some individuals learn to wash the sweet potato with salt water. And this habit has been transmitted generation after generation. Dry stone walls are the results of ecological codes culturally transmitted in man. Peru stone walls is different than Sicily stone wall, than Irish dry stone walls. But if the worker finish hand to make this job, the codes that has been used to create such amazing structure disappear. In nature, there are natural engineers, like termites or village weather. These species create important structure that are maintained genetically. They produce the same buildings because they are using the same project, of course, in terms of limits of evolution, and in a window, not too large window of evolution. The same are the ecoacoustic codes used by birds to transmit information. This is the spectrogram of Silvia tricapilla, black cap, is very common bird, or very common also in La Spezia. And this is the figure of the spectrogram. And this figure is the result of an adaptation of the ecoacoustic codes to the environment, fixed in genetic, at least. But there are also some learned components. Or a completely different figure of a spectrogram, you can appreciate here, by house sparrow, that is adapted to stay in open area on the roofs of our buildings, but in nature originally was a desert animal. Cognitive template or search image are fundamental component of coding process that allows a species to obtain material or immaterial resources. For instance, the robbing is a classic, the experiment to pose a red spot close to a robbing. The robbing attack immediately the red spot because in its cognitive, this species has a cognitive templates for the red spot. That means a competitor. Okay, this is an example. So cognitive templates activated by states of internal physiological needs or by cues of various kinds coming from external world are used to locate resources. So resources that are embedded in ecofield define, this is another definition, I apologize, but this idea, I published this idea many years ago. The ecofield is defined as a special configuration carrier of a specific meaning perceived by a species when a living function is activated. The ecofield model is adopted in the coding process that operates in a landscape. This is an example of what it means for foraging ecofield. Again, the example of honeybee is starting, the work is starting for the hive and is searching for not a urban area, but a shrubby area or open area. And the honeybee select open pasture, this, okay, and search for flower patches, and in the flower patching is select this, for example, white flower, searching for pollen or searching for nectar. So the honeybee utilize different eco fields for foraging. The ecofields are the results of a combination of cognitive templates and landscape configuration. And this combination is made by a coding process. 5 minutes. Okay, my stopwatch is saying something different, but no worry. Okay, no, I stop, but or this is not working well. No, I have just 1, 2. Okay, 5 minutes. So the human ecological code shapes the landscape, creating ecofield used by other species, like logging. So it's a chain of codes, the same flower fields that are human artifacts and are utilized by weathers as a foraging ecofield. So a large portion of the genetic evolution of species depends on the temporal persistence of ecological codes. The shorter the life of ecological codes, the lower the possibility that these codes will become part of the genome. Environmental stability favors the fixation of new ecological codes in the genome. So if you have a high turnover of ecological codes, you can have detrimental, negative action on biodiversity. But some species are favored by such new ecological codes. And I conclude this story with the example of a state of nature that is one of the best examples of ecological codes used by humans. The vegetation polychromy, ecofield, or landscape structural complexity ecofields are utilized for plant diversity, animal diversity, or variety of ecological niche, abundance of immaterial resources. Okay, I jump the 2 last, and I conclude. Tourism is a social phenomenon activated by innate ecological codes based on landscape aesthetic. Mass tourism, a short circuit of ecological codes far from Earth stewardship. So we have an impressive number of tourists that are moved by innate, common, aesthetic, ecological codes. This is an innate choice made by imitation. This is people waiting the train in Cinque Terre railway station. We are like a starling that we behave by imitation and by individual decision, not by social decision. I conclude with these slides. The ecological codes are innate, and our ancestors have used such codes to hunting and to fishing and to collecting fruits. Tourism is using the same innate codes of our ancestors. For this reason that tourism is a worldwide phenomenon, because this code is innate in every humans. But the learned ecological codes require education training programs. And if we don't use learned ecological codes, it's not possible not to preserve or conserve the earth, that is not sufficient, but to take care of the earth, because we are 8 billion people. For this reason, new program, new research in ecological codes, human ecological codes, are a way, in my opinion, a strategy to not to solve everything, but to try to move, to shift a paradigm that until now has been fixed only on conservation. The conservation of nature is not enough. We have created a hospital for nature without a doctor and assistant. We need doctor and assistant because nature is ill, is suffering. It is not enough to create the hospital. But politicians believe, unfortunately, and also many scientists, that hospitals are sufficient, building of hospitals are sufficient to recover in nature. We need a direct action, and ecological codes is a way, very important strategy to do this. I apologize for, I am in time, eh? Thank you. Sì, eccoci. Discussion niente, eh? Non facciamo più di una discussione? No? Sì, ma non abbiamo iniziato alle 9, abbiamo iniziato più tardi, sembra, scusate questo, ci siamo?
Okay, for streaming. Okay, so I will start with theory and then pass to a few examples. Let me start the presentation. Okay. So there is a strong evidence of codes in human life, and we can refer it to everyday life. I mean, we use email, we send emails almost every day, and an email address is part of a very simple code, because the owner of the email is supposed to be the only one to know the password. And this is a very simple code connecting the address with the owner. The problem is that this code is ambiguous, and in an analogous way to the evolution of organic codes, it tries to move from ambiguity to a reduction. Maybe not an optimization, but a reduction. So nowadays we use mobile phones or other devices to prove, to specify that we are the owner of a certain email address. Another example that is more about tourism is what I'm calling the syntax of cappuccino. Cappuccino, in the Italian culture, should be eaten, so it should be part of a meal, usually with some sweets or something sweet to eat, and it should be before midday, not after. Then, of course, tourism follows different patterns because of different cultural approaches to food and drink. And actually, here in La Spezia, I think they are used to eat focaccia with cappuccino, so it's a mix that is that many tourists may like, but it's not standard for Italians who don't want cappuccino with salted food. But this means that even food codes have a kind of syntax that is that can be compared with language syntax. I mean, we can have ungrammatical composition of elements, like cappuccino with cappuccino in the afternoon with pizza. That's not okay for the Italian code. And this sounds ungrammatical, just like a syntax error, like people goes to the beach, rather than people go to the beach. From this evidence, I'm trying to observe that in code biology, language is not something done by just one brain. we need a network of brains. This is the hypothesis of distributed language. And this means that a language is spoken by a community of brains. You cannot have language with just one brain. And recently, Paul Thibault has proposed a view of languaging that he calls it 9E views of languages, but we focus on just a couple of them. And one is the extension of language to people, artifacts, tools, technology, situations, and cultural patterns. So language is made by a social and cultural environment that includes also technologies. It's not just something that happens in the individual competence, individual linguistic competence. This competence couldn't form and work without a network, let's say, or he prefers to say meshwork to say that the network is very interpenetrated. And this interpenetration of the languaging makes it an ecological code, because it's a functional system that integrates a person, the ways of expression, like utterances, sentences, and so on, texts, and the environment. So it's not something happening by means of mental and individual models. It happens in the situation, in the context. And if we consider this ecological nature of languaging, we might combine it with some ideas proposed by Almofarina. So we might say that languaging, in its ecological sense, is part of a wider picture. And actually it's an acoustic picture. It's part of a soundscape that is defined in terms of, is defined as an important component of a landscape created by different overlap of geophonies, so earth and sky sounds and other phenomena, biophonies and technophonies. So, I mean, living beings producing sound, or, you know, industrial production and other technological devices producing sound. But the landscape is not only characterized by a soundscape, it has also a cultural landscape. We had examples in the previous talk. A cultural landscape is one in which patterns and processes are the result of a long period of human interference on compatible terms with natural dynamics. Every historical epoch has had consequences on landscapes. A cultural landscape, in a human perspective, may exist at different levels of naturalness, offering additional sources of inspiration, beliefs, identity, and belonging. This refers to the immaterial resources that are combined with the material ones. And as we will see, the landscape, the geological landscape, is in an analogous relation with dialect, because a certain territory is characterized by its orography, its way of organizing production in that land, and the way of speaking, which is somehow representative of the identity of the place. So even if Thibault's view of languaging is more on the social and cultural environment, we might still integrate it with a more landscape-oriented ecology, because he says in his book on languaging that he's open to such integrations. So we might change the formulation of the extension of languaging among people, artifacts and so on, and consider among the cultural patterns and conventions also the landscapes. And this means that landscapes can present different cultural landscapes, I mean, can present different time scales and different sizes in space. In this perspective, languaging is an ecological code rather than a mental one, since it takes place between a linguistic community and its environment, a certain people and a certain territory. So we might say that it is an anthropophonic contribution to the soundscape. And the connection between landscape and dialect was acknowledged by a local scholar here in Lunigiana already in the 60s. Augusto Cesare Ambrosi once wrote, the dialect surely is a heritage of the place. It is the voice of the ancestor itself, a distinctive element and a characteristic in a certain sense, comparable to the landscape that in its extreme varieties and differences always distinguishes a place from another. Let's give a little example of this connection between dialect and landscape. In the 13th century, the Lunigiana area, so the area that was under the control of the Bishop of Luni, has a very complex cultural landscape, has a very complex integration of man and nature. We can see some examples from the quotation. Intensive pasture, specialized cultivation, port operation, commercial areas and receptive structures, and terrestrial and maritime communication routes interacted there. This is a multifunctional and multipolar. There wasn't a center. There were different productive devices, a high diversity of landscape of organization, and this reflected on the political organization. There was not a constant seat of the bishop's court. Sarzana, at a certain point, was a relevant city in the area, but it wasn't the main place where the bishop was. The mobility of the court was probably functional to a distributed and multi-center economy too. And this reflects in the linguistic situation of Lunigiana. This is an old map of what you have seen before. Here you have the Gulf of La Spezia, and Sarzana is here. As you can see, this is not the center, the cultural center. It is on a border. It is not the center of a specific dialect variety, but it's surrounded by different dialects. Just because the absence of a strong religious and political urban center is reflected in the linguistic map of Lunigiana. I don't go into details of the different dialects, but they sound and are very very different among themselves. I don't know how much time is left, but I start to expose a bigger example. According to some historical linguists, La Spezia's dialect presents strongly Ligurian traits, revealing a strong connection with Genoa's dialect. In fact, we can find a reflection of this special link, we might say, that goes across history, all modern age, and also 19th century. This linguistic link between La Spezia and Genoa is partially documented by the political link. For a period of time during Renaissance, La Spezia was ruled by a captain elected in Genoa. This captain had an important role since during the second half of the 15th century, La Spezia represents the most important Ligurian city after Genoa. And it's also the second most important port, harbor, because if Genoa was somehow getting to rule or to be the most important navy, at least a commercial navy in Mediterranean area during modern age, La Spezia was specialized in the Tyrrhenian Sea, in the commercial distribution in the Tyrrhenian Sea. So it was more regional, but it was part of a Mediterranean commercial empire. And of course, when Genoa lost its independence during modern age, La Spezia, even if it was the second in political order in the region, had a good connection with Milan, and this made the city even stronger, even more important. And in that time, it was built during Renaissance, the first arsenal. So the big arsenal we now see had an historical precedent in the political landscape of Renaissance. It was, of course, a smaller arsenal, and it wasn't meant to build ships, but it was meant to protect and preserve them. And I'm close to the conclusion. This example shows that political and linguistic history goes hand in hand, and this means that there is a long time scale, at least a couple of centuries, even 3 centuries, in which language and politics, but also economics, interact. This larger size of the political and economic landscape would correspond to the longer time scales of cultural historical processes that Thibault considers part of the what he calls etiosphere, which is an ethical reconception of biosphere. La Spezia's growth is part of 2 long-lasting processes. According to the famous historian Fernand Braudel, the economic center of the Mediterranean area was a quadrilateral, whose vertices were Venice, Milan, Genoa, and Florence in early modern age. Inside this quadrilateral, the center was moving from Venice to Genoa. According to the linguist Fiorenzo Toso, Genoa's dialect expressed the common commercial and then financial vocation and collective identity against Florence in the Ligurian culture since the 15th century. These 2 processes, if you look also on the centuries involved, intertwine, since Florence will be the last rival Genoa had to face after the relative decadence of Venice and Milan, and before Genoa's triumph during the second half of the 16th century. And this happened because Genoa was a commercial and financial partner of the King of Spain. And this gave it the control of the silver and gold coming from the New World. So you can see that this political mechanism means also a transfer of material resources and also of illness and pathogenic agents from the New World to the Old World. Okay, this is just a reference to the bibliography. I think I can stop for discussion to get more in details, or if you have doubts and considerations.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, you have time for discussion. Questions?
I get something for the
questions? Okay, please.
Yeah, Japanese could, thank you. Japanese could be totally indifferent to the aesthetic beauty of the place if there is no symbolic value attached to, to a certain place. So I think as an ecological form, we could, something which creates the possibility of the codes functioning, we could take into account the difference between, let's say, natural givens and our cultural, let's say, presuppositions, to put it mildly, which we project on this natural environment and naturalize it a little bit. Yeah, that's a remark.
Okay. Do you want to respond, or okay? Thank you for the reference to the landscape. Of course, we might say that soundscape, at least it's a scientific construct. Of course, it's a Western construct, we know, but it's measurable. Of course, the cultural landscape is something that has measurable parts, but also nameable parts. And the nameable part depend on how we name and according to which conceptual schemes we do this. We might say also that the different landscape representation in China and Japan started from a different usage of the territory. So we might, in order not to lose the specificity of different landscapes, and also to give to landscape an intercultural or cross-cultural definition, we should say that landscape starts from practices, concrete practices that are by definition different, and I might say that in the specific case of China and Japan, the starting point is a different body practice. The body is part of a flow, and this flow is part of the landscape. Now we are getting to a flow conception. We might say that ecology and other, even Paul Thibault refers to Confucian philosophy of language. So we are getting there somehow, but still we need to know that we tend to think the landscape as something seen by an individual, while there's no individual in the center of the Chinese landscape. There may be void, there may be mist, and so on. And this, of course, comes also from the fact that there was mist there, for instance, and a lot of other things. So, but if we start from what is measurable, we might understand how different practices produce different landscape, and landscape is thought in different ways. But yes, it's important to distinguish landscape from soundscape and consider also the cultural dimension of landscape.
Okay, we have still 5 minutes, please.
So, thank you for this presentation. I was directing an undergraduate thesis for the last year, and he's using Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations to talk about development and evolution of languages. And
Yes, thanks for the remark, because it reminds me of the Conquest of America by Todorov, because there all the discussion, then it was taken up by Umberto Eco in Kant and the Platypus. There is a whole discussion about how to call, how horses were called by native people. So it's a kind of divine deer or something like that. And the point there, it's interesting because when there's something new, you need to create something new to express it. And when it comes to earthquake, but it's the same about the deers somehow, if you start from a model that is, metaphysical in the, it was a, so basically, if you start from a metaphysical model like the native people, you get something. If you start from, a scientific conception of earthquake, you are creating a totally different cultural landscape. And there it means that somehow in the Pidgin and Creole languages, there might be a dominance of one model language on the other. Because of course, if you treat earthquakes, I don't know which was the word for earthquake in that case.
The word for what?
Earthquake. In
They didn't have, I don't know who had one. So I don't know which one actually made a contribution or if they made
Okay.
something wholly different, because the French didn't have one. So, but they're the conquistadors. So, but the people, the native, perhaps, of course, must have had some kind of reference. But it's the people who come to have to work together that create this word, because now they have a mutual problem.
Yeah. No, but just I was wondering if your student was analyzing the word that they created for.
Not the word in particular, no.
Okay. Because that will be interesting, because depending on the, might. Yeah, because of course we work together, we create a language together, but still there are, we might say that probably some models come from some languages and some cultures, and other models from others. So in the Pidgin that might be, like in Italian. In Italian we have some Arabic words, we have some Spanish words, and so, I mean, of course we don't speak a Pidgin or a Creole, but still there were situations in which we did the same thing in certain semantic fields.
Okay. Just the last question very quickly.
Sorry for the long answer.
Always when I hear the word landscape, I can't avoid thinking about Waddington's epigenetic landscape. And I'm sure you are familiar with the model, which is a hill with valleys. And what he postulated even before genetics was known is that this a differentiation of a cell or its fate had to do with its way on this landscape rather than with determinant genetic aspects. And it seems to me that from all you've said, every landscape is epigenetic. In terms of embryology, and Marcello can correct me if I'm doing a very bad summary of that, what is meaningful is that there are some stable configurations of the system that don't have to do with the wishes of the modeler or so on. They are rather thermodynamic. So a cell can be a neuron, hepatocyte, or an endothelial cell, but pretty much these valleys exist. So for me, could you speculate on which are the valleys of a cultural, linguistic, sound landscape?
there's a lot to think about. But yeah, I mean, this will mean that it's a bit like the problem with interpretation. We know it happens when you get closer to animals and humans. Landscape, of course, happens to animals, plants, and so on. But when it comes to cellular landscape or cellular evolution or dynamics, speaking of landscape might be out of a methodological reach, might be more a fiction or a metaphor to speak about. But maybe maybe thermodynamics can transform the thermodynamic perspective can transform our fiction in something more concrete if we find some link, some mathematical link maybe, I don't know.
Okay, thank you very much. We are in time.
Thank you.
I ask to Adam Kuhn to present his speech. Yes, please. Why you talking after me? Just a moment, he's coming the technician.
Okay. You make it into
Qual è il slide?
I missed the last one, so you can just.
Okay.
Yes, and I also agree with the street. Yeah. Do I need to sit? What can I stand?
As you like.
It's like, yeah. It's just, for me, it's just strange to give a talk while sitting. It's fine. Most of them are going to be black, so. I mean, not like blank. It's just like background. That's annoying. That's it's an annoying soundscape. The clinging. Okay. First of all, I'm very happy to be here again. There was some gap years, so to speak. But finally I'm again here. And I'm not going to speak about the genetic code, which was why I'm here, why I was here in the first place many, many years ago. But then I kind of begin to know what code biology is, and I think I have some ideas of how it can be further explored. So I am a biologist by training. I mostly work with origin of life. It's not me, yeah, I mean, you can just leave it on. I think it's perfectly visible. And then, I don't like that dark. I also did my share on evolution of cooperation and on major transition and evolution. I'm also an ecologist, so I can very much relate to what Amo already told us, and I very much like this analogy about the hospitals without doctors and nurses. I'm also a science communicator, which that important here. This conference was, for me, also a very interdisciplinary one. And interdiscipline has its own challenges and many of its own rewards. But the challenge is that we mostly speak a different language. It's not that we have to just learn each other's language, not like we have to use, we just have to learn that certain things might mean something different, okay? Like a comma-free code means something totally different in mathematics, and in biology, as I learned, it's called comma-less. I mean, the genetic code is comma-less, which just means that there is no gaps between the nucleotides. But of course, the comma-free code in mathematics means that the start is always set, right? You cannot start from anywhere, just randomly. And these things are important because otherwise, if you don't know, you might just misinterpret each other's ideas. So, I joined the Cold Biology meeting in the second one in Jena, and Peter Dietrich had a very, I think, very important remark in one of the coffee breaks, that we should always put our definition of a code in one of the first slides. I mean, not the first slide, that's usually the title, but some of the first summary slides, there should be a definition of a code. It's important because usually when someone says code, for me, code is what we have like there. It's a program, okay? Because I'm a theoretical biologist, I do code, this kind of codes. And I go to the Merriam-Webster dictionary of what codes are, and yeah, it's a systematic statement of a body of law, a system of principles, of rules, a system of signals or symbols for communication. I mean, language is a code in the sense we use it like here. A system of symbols with often secret meanings, coded language. The dictionary also has the genetic code as like the code. Or an instruction for a computer, I mean, okay, for me, this is like code. But see, there is an element which is important here, ambiguity. If it would be a conference on law, then everyone would have the first meaning mostly as a code. If it would be just origin of life, it would be the genetic code. If it would be just linguistics, then some of the middle ones. And we know that for codes of life, ambiguity is important. Okay, I need, okay. I have these ones. I cannot really push the the forward button with that. Okay. It's okay. So, my definition of code, it's not my definition, it's the definition I'm going to use. It's a mapping between the object of two independent words that is implemented by the object of a third word called adapters. That's the Barbie definition of a code, right? I prefer that it's called Codes of Life. That was the title of the book which kind of introduced me to code biology. And because, I mean, as I said, for me, codes are just something in a computer. But Codes of Life has, for me, this very specific meaning that relates to this definition. I'm going to use this definition, and this is a very cartoonish representation of a code. There's this two word, which is then mapped and joined by the adapter, which could be a third word. Yep. And now I change topic because my topic is on codes and on open-ended evolution. It's a bit on evolution. So evolution requires reproduction, heredity, and variation. This is the three things that requires for something to evolve. And evolution, by definition, is a change in frequency of a heritable trait. Now, we can have evolution if there is only, if we have two traits, okay? There are blue and red individuals, and if we select the blue puppies instead of the red ones, they're not going to be red puppies because puppies are not red and definitely not blue, but we can still select them. If it would be a heritable trait, like different colors in dog breeds, then we can end up with one of them. Now, dog breeds don't come in just 2 colors, there are huge variety. If there is just two variants, then evolution would fix one of them, most of the cases. Like in this is like the frequency. Let's say trait 1 is somehow superior, and it's just going to be fixate, which means that's the only one present. And that's the end of evolution, okay? If there is no variation with just one trait, it just cannot change, okay? In order to have newer forms, we need mutations. I mean, the generation of new variants, and open-ended evolution means that there is always new variants, so that evolution can select between them. Most of them are going to be bad, okay, and just select it out. But at least we might stumble upon a new one which is better, okay? Open-ended evolution requires a lot of variation, potential variation. There's also this notion of unlimited heredity or unlimited evolutionary potential. And it mostly means that the possible variations are much greater than the number of individuals. I mean, the number of actual realization of that variation, okay? Think about genetics. Even with 8 billion of us, and well, not all of us, but most of us are different from each other. I mean, twins, that's called maternal twins, right? What's the right English term for twins who are from the same egg? Yeah, but the common language. Identical, sorry. So, identical twins, they are genetically the same. They're still not the same trait-wise, okay? Because of development and whatever happened with them during their life. Genetic space is basically so huge that we cannot really exhaust it ever, okay? The number of different genetic variation is, okay, it doesn't seem, it's 4 on the power of n, where n is the number of nucleotides we have in our genome, which is 3-point-something billion in our case for the haploid genome. So I mean, the whole genetic set is a bit larger, like twice. Why call it unlimited? Think about it. Our genome is a space, not like the actual genome of a human being, but it's a genetic space. It encompasses like every bacteria ever present on Earth. Because bacterial genetic space is much smaller. I mean, it's usually a few million base pairs, and we have 3 billion base pairs. Okay, so I mean, with that genetic space, not the actual genetics of a human being, but with that genetic space, we can code for any bacteria. We can code for all primates or whatever. I was stealing, okay. Make a comment. If you have a comment, just make it. Yeah. Indeed. On the other hand, even if I say that, okay, the genotype space of a human being encompasses like chimpanzee, there is no way to evolve a human to a chimpanzee. Okay? Because in between, there's going to be a lot of lethal variant. Okay, but then, okay, but open-ended evolution actually is based on that huge space. So how can we achieve open-ended evolution? And mostly, evolution is a tinkerer. It just uses what's on hand and uses it a bit differently. And we then go back to this word ambiguity. Codes are ambiguous by definition, okay? I mean, they are potentially ambiguous. The genetic code, which is like, you know, the code with big letters. My problem with that one is that it's a map that is frozen. It was ambiguous. It was probably very much in the very beginning, and then it's kind of solidified, and then there was some more changes afterwards, but now it just doesn't change. We can engineer changes, okay? I mean, artificially we can engineer changes, but it's not going to change. But there are a lot of codes that change even from species to species. And I'm going to give some examples of those, because evolution is a tinkerer, indeed. So, this is a cartoonish representation of how a code can change. I mean, this is just a code, but it can link, if it still maps word 1 to word 2, but either this one can change what it maps to or what it maps from. And that would mean something different. I need to get some actual examples. I mean, how science works. Once I was actually called on a phone by some reporters that she was very interested in bitter taste receptors, and then bitter taste receptors seems to be all over in our body, which is actually true. We discovered them because they are bitter taste receptors in our tongue. But then it turned out that it's also expressed in various strange parts of our body, like the heart, or the lung, or male reproductive organs, where we cannot really say that it's really for bitter taste. I mean, why would my heart measure the bitterness of food? There's no food there, right? I mean, if there is food in my heart, that's very problematic all over. But bitter taste just means a set of strange chemicals having some common chemical moiety, and the bitter taste receptor can just bind them. What it does, I mean, what the cell does afterwards gives it meaning, okay? If it's a bitter taste receptors, then my brain will say, okay, this is bitter. I might like it or might not. I mean, coffee, yes. I know I'm going to break Italian codes, cultural codes, because I like my cappuccino after lunch. And very sweet, which, okay, also might be a problem. Sugars is not a problem, but just, if I do it after lunch anyway, it's already bad. So it's basically, okay. Sorry. So basically, we have an adapter. It still has the same, you know, chemicals, but then it maps to something different. Okay, like in this case, same chemicals, but it means something different in my heart, and it means something different in my tongue. Or I am not an embryologist. Sorry, it's not the right. But we have these Hox genes. They are very conserved all over animals. And the end result are different animals, okay? The same genes make the basic layout of an animal from head to, well, we don't have tails, but head to end. But in the end, it's going to be a fly, a worm, or a human being, okay? Still, they are the same. But then the actual genes and actual cell types they affect in the end are different. Hopefully I can. Well, for example, sex determination. It's basically the same genes that are involved. Many of these, like SOX9 or this DMRT1, it's also active in us. And these are actually in male development. In mammals, there's this SRY, the sex-determining region of the chromosome Y. It's a gene which just switches on a pathway that makes us man. And if it's not present, then the embryo is going to be a female. I mean, a woman, in case of us. But the rest of the genes are very much the same, okay? Like it would be in a bird, or it would be in a lizard, or something like that. I mean, mostly the same. For example, in birds, it's this one. It's also in mammals. It's just not the sex-determining gene. This one, and actually the amount they have, if they have like twice, it's going to be a male. If it has just one chromosome, so just half amount, it's going to be a female bird. So there's it's a pathway, and it can be affected in various ways. Now we have very few mammals which basically don't have this gene, and still can be male or female, or if they have this gene, there is another one which basically switches them off. Okay? There's a series of different codes. In the end, there are males and females. Neuronal codes, just as a brief example, this is rafflesia. We know that this has a very stinky smell. And that very stinky smell for us means avoid it. Okay, because it's basically, and not the flower, we don't have no problem with that flower. What we have problem is with rotting meat. Okay, rotting meat is not something we want to touch or smell or be around it, whatever. But flies like it, okay? It's the same molecule, set of molecules, but in our brain it said avoid, go away. In them, go near them, you can lay their, one can lay their eggs on it. Okay? There might be some examples when the words change, okay? It's like totally different words. These were just, molecules affecting different other molecules down the stream. But even the words mapped can be changed. For example, we smell light. I mean, that's strange. I mean, we don't really smell light. But how we actually sense light is we have a receptor, the rhodopsin, and we have the transretinidine, which is basically a chemical attached to that sensor. And because that molecule changes its form depending on light, but it's basically a chemical sensor, it then fires in our retinal cells, and then we see something. But it's basically a chemical sensor, which means that previously it matched a chemical sphere, odors, to some sensation. Now we see light. I have to mention Robert's paper, like 2 years ago, with modular codes. And the idea was expressed there very nicely, that through this series of codes, series of different adapters, different inputs and outputs, we can have a lot of very different things, okay? Just by the combination of different codes. And that combination can produce that vast number of different variation that we need for open-ended evolution. Hopefully I still have some time, huh? Like 1 minute, okay? So what I wanted to propose, that we have a list of what codes do through the evolution. First, the code emerge. Ambiguity reduced at the first stage because of avoidance of errors. But then the mapping is optimized. There's a conservation for a given purpose. And I think there's a next step. then we can use the same code for different things. And okay, I think that we could call it repurposing. Okay, and this repurposing, what makes it conducive for openness revolution. Okay, so that's the main idea. Because of ambiguity of codes, there could be variation, and there can be a combinatorial explosion of what is mapped to what in the end, in basically pathways of codes. And so we can have open-ended evolution, which is very much required. As a very small note, what I'm going to do next in code biology is look for codes in the origin of life. I think the genetic code was just one of the something, not the first. There should be a few before that. I have not yet found them. Maybe not, was not thinking about them enough. Thank you very much.
We have time for discussion. I suggest you to be relaxed because no one is waiting us outside. Just the coffee break, but
That's important, isn't it?
it's important, but it's waiting for. So I suggest again to stay in time, but 5 minutes is nothing because you are coming from so far, okay? And so it's important to discuss about this thematic. So I open the discussion for this last talk. Please use the microphone because we are streaming.
My daughter always says, Mommy, you don't need to just teach your voice. So Adam, I was just curious if you knew anything about the similar receptors that you mentioned with respect to bitter, with respect to sweet. Because I was listening or reading something about the artificial sweeteners don't do the same as sugar, and I don't
okay, I know that it's not just the bitter taste receptors. In the end, they also found basically every kind of other receptors all over our body. It's just, you know, happenstance that I came to this first, and it's probably more studied. I mean, but we know that there are sweet receptors all over our body. So it's known. It's like, and also umami. So I mean, most of the taste receptors can be found elsewhere, not just in our tongue, which means I think it's just that these are a set of molecules, and it has to be measured the amount flowing around, or I mean, for example, in our intestines, bitter could mean just as bitter, and we need enzymes to break it down. But it can also mean that there is a pathogen, mostly parasites like worms, present because they extrude these chemicals, which means that then some of the bitter taste receptors actually enhances immune functions. And the same can be, I mean, I don't think there are very sweet worms around. It's mostly something good.
Okay, I was fascinated by the by the genomic space. You know, the image you have shown. I think that, but I want to hear your opinion on this. But I think it might be close to certain linguistic relations between system and norm. The system in structural linguistics, it's a very formal set of oppositions, and basically the history of a language, so say Italian, lasts centuries, and what changes is mainly the norms, so how we pronounce, how we construct the sentences and so on, but there are some oppositions which make Italian the same across its history. And of course, every norm employs only some possibilities of the system, because the system could be actualized in different norms without changing. This might this be a parallel between languages and genome and its manifestation?
The short answer is yes. The longer one is that language is one of the, it's an open-ended hereditary system. I mean, in biology, we call it like this. It's an hereditary system, it's called symbolic. And it's open-ended in the sense that not every novel has been written, okay? Even though the words are the same. And the rules are the same. But we can always produce a new one, okay? It's not like, not all of the stories have been told. And the analogy can go on and think about the soundscape, or might actually also include all the other languages. Not all, but at least some of them. But I think, for example, there's no way to transform Italian to Hungarian. It would take some. So there's only limited things that you can change. Even though, I mean, I don't really know about the evolution of Italian language, but in Hungarian, for example, articles were not used a few 100 years ago. Like if Finnish doesn't have it now. But now we have articles, okay? Or some of the endings change, or some of the tenses just change over the years. Some just fade out, we won't understand them anymore, and some of them just solidifies. So yeah, actually, language is the best way to teach evolution, because people understand that it changes. And it changes in a hereditary manner, because we teach our kids the language, which then, of course, changes.
I don't know the history of Hungarian language, of course, but sometimes a linguistic association, so it's not just the story of this of that linguistic structure, but the fact that a certain structure is in political and social contact with other languages, this might make some similar elements in the grammar. So maybe if there are...
Virtue. I mean, vocabulary.
Yes,
yeah.
Sometimes even grammar.
Really? Okay. I mean, you have linguistics.
Grammar can spread because of linguistic association. So some languages which are not related genealogically, but they are related politically and socially, might copy some items from one another.
Okay. I think that I see that Barbieri is asking for time. Before starting the coffee break, I will invite very shortly the mayor of my village, please, Gianluigi. He's coming now because an accident has stopped the highway and he arrived in delay. Very simple. If you have to make a very short, because time is, we haven't time.
I speak in Italia.
In Italia velocissimo.
No, grazie, benvenuti, mi fa piacere essere qua con voi, sono felice insomma di questo invito da parte del professor Almo Farina, che è un orgoglio della comunità fivizzano per le sue capacità e conoscenze scientifiche, per cui vi auguro un buon lavoro e una buona giornata.
It's my political sponsor. Okay, thank you very much, Gianluigi. And now it's time for the coffee break. It's in the hotel. Marcello, you are coming for the coffee break? Perhaps, no? No. So I will guide you to the coffee break, please. We have half an hour. And again, be relaxed. No train is waiting us. You can maintain here, no money, because, you know, money and documents, no. Other things, yeah. Kids, you can Okay? It's time, we have 10 minutes late, but we, a presentation is missing this morning, so we have time. And now it's my great pleasure to ask to Marcello to present his talk. Please, Marcello, it's your time. A switch on. Yes. Try. Yeah, now. Switch again.
No, ma vabbè. Okay. Now, last year in Portugal, I announced that the time had come for me to step down as president of the Code Biology Society and to pass a testimonial to a new generation. This has been done, and our society has therefore a new governing board, which is this one. Now, the new governing board has been the result of many considerations, and here is a summary of them. The new president, Nicolas Stambuk, is widely known for his relational model of the genetic code, a model that is a totally new description of that universal code. The Vice President, Elena Fimmel, and the Treasurer, Lutz Strungman, are known for their research on circular codes, the rules that are probably the remnants of ancient comma-free codes. João Carlos Major has realized the first videos of our talks, and videos are probably the best ways of circulating our ideas. Robert Prince has made a list of hundreds of biological codes that has taken everybody by surprise, and that is probably going to change the opinion of many people about codes. Chris Ottolenghi has organized in Paris the very first conference in code biology on code biology in 2014. Peter Dietrich has organized the second conference in Vienna and has strongly contributed to the diffusion of code biology in Germany. Almo Farina has organized a third conference in Urbino that has become widely known for his discovery of the ecological code. Lukas Samechnik has introduced code biology in the University of Olomouc in the Czech Republic, and Camilla Robuski in the University of Torino in Italy. Candy Shelby and Marcella Faria have contributed to our conferences in the beginning, and have repeatedly illustrated the connection that exists between code biology and the humanities. The last three members of the board come from different schools. Yanni Hofmeier has published a model of the cell according to the relational model of Robert Rosen, whereas Don Favreau and Victoria Alexander are still active members of biosemiotics. It is a fact, however, that they give an important contribution to code biology, and this is why they too have been invited to join our board. So there is a variety of people here that in a way represent the history of what code biology has been so far. This is therefore my last talk as president of our society, and it is dedicated to a synthesis of code biology, more precisely to a synthesis of its three major ideas. Now, Schrödinger and the laws of physics. In 1944, Erwin Schrödinger wrote What is Life?, a little book that inspired a generation of scientists and became a landmark in the history of biology. There were two seminal concepts in that book. One was the idea that the genetic material is like an aperiodic crystal. The other was the view that the chromosomes contain a miniature code script for the development of the body. The example of the aperiodic crystals was used by Schrödinger to convey the idea that the molecules of the genetic material are arranged in unique sequences, and a few years later these sequences become known as genetic information. The example of the code script was used to express the idea that there must be a miniature code in the hereditary substance, a code that Schrödinger compared to a Morse code with many characters, and was supposed to carry the plan of development of the entire organism. That was the very first time that the word code was associated with the biological structure and was given a biological function. Now, the idea of the genetic sequences and of the miniature code led Schrödinger to a third conclusion, an idea that he expressed in the form of a prophecy. Living matter, while not eluding the laws of physics as established up to date, is likely to involve hitherto unknown other laws of physics, which, however, once have been revealed, will just form an integral part of this science as the former. Schrödinger, in other words, realized that the known laws of physics do not explain life, and concluded that we need other laws of physics in order to achieve that purpose. Now, the existence of other laws of physics has been an illusion, but the problem has not gone away. We still need to find out what is it that accounts for the existence of life on our planet. The first idea of code biology. Schrödinger proposed that we need new laws of physics in order to explain life. But in reality, a different solution does exist. It is the idea that life does not require new laws of physics, but new laws of biology, i.e. new codes. This is the solution of code biology. A solution which amounts to say that life obeys the laws of physics and chemistry, but is based on the arbitrary rules of its codes. Now, this is the big change that code biology is bringing about. We go from a period in which life was based on the laws of physics and chemistry or on deterministic law to the idea that life is based on arbitrary rules and codes. Okay? This is probably the biggest innovation for code biology. More precisely, life is based on arbitrary rules that have been highly conserved in evolution. The generation of a code, in other words, is not enough. Equally important is the conservation of that code. And this is why the mechanism of coding consists of two complementary processes: the mechanism that generates the coding rule and the mechanism that conserves them. The key point in any case is the idea that life is based on arbitrary rules. This is the first idea of code biology. The difference between life and matter is not due to the laws of physics, chemistry, it is due to arbitrary rules. More precisely, it is due to arbitrary rules that have been highly conserved throughout the history of life. The second idea of code biology, the copying of the genes and the coding of proteins are two different mechanisms of life, and none of them can be reduced to the other, because copying deals with information, whereas coding deals with meaning. This implies that copying and coding are not only two different mechanisms of life, but also two different mechanisms of evolution. Because a mechanism of evolution is the long-term result of a fundamental molecular mechanism. More precisely, it implies that evolution took place by copying and coding, by natural selection and by natural conventions. This is the second great ideas of code biology. There are two mechanisms at the basis of life, copying and coding, and this means that there are two mechanisms at the basis of evolution, natural selection and natural conventions, okay? And this is yet another novelty. The third idea of code biology. All codes are conventions, but they are conventions that are not codes. Many animals, for example, have the ability to interpret what goes on in the world, and the faculty of interpretation is based on processes of abduction, not on coding rules. Another example is languaging, the mechanism that is responsible for the acquisition of language during the first years of human life, and make use of processes that are more complex than coding rules. Language, in other words, contain codes, but cannot be reduced to codes. From a historical point of view, the novelties that appeared in the first 3,000 million years of the history of life were all generated by codes. Okay? So coding and codes were the only mechanism that worked for the first 3,000 million years of life. Interpretation and language appeared only near the end of that history, but they too were natural conventions because they too were based on arbitrary rules. This is the third idea of code biology, the idea that coding, interpretation, and languaging are three different types of natural conventions, three different mechanisms that are all based on arbitrary rules and have profoundly changed the history of life. So, yes, life is based on arbitrary rules, but in fact it is based on three different types of arbitrary rules, and not just one. Okay, so today we have ample experimental evidence that many codes exist in living systems. But so far this evidence has circulated only in small circles and has not yet reached university books and courses. What exists in nature, however, cannot be ignored, so we can assume that sometimes in the future the codes will become parts of biology. Okay? What exists in nature, what is an experimental reality, must become parts of biology. It is possible, however, that codes will be regarded new experimental facts that must be taken into account, but do not require theoretical changes. Now, it is important, therefore, to underline that the existence of many codes in life is not only an experimental fact. It is one of those facts that have outstanding theoretical implications. And we have already seen what are these implications. They are the three ideas that we have mentioned. The idea that life is based on arbitrary rules, the idea that evolution took place by natural selection, by natural convention, and the idea there are three different types of natural conventions in life. The important point is that these ideas can be tested. The existence of arbitrary rules, the genetic code, for example, has been the result of a long series of experiments. Code biology, in other words, is not only the study of the codes that exist in living systems, it is also the study of the biological implication of these extraordinary experimental facts. Some of these implications have already come to light, but many others remains to be discovered. The conclusion, therefore, is that code biology is not only a new research field, it is a new research field that is only at the beginning of its development. So here we are. It's now that we have the experimental evidence that many codes do exist in life, code biology becomes a new thing, a new enterprise, a new research field with a new president. So it will be more and more based on experimental facts, without forgetting that these experimental facts have extremely important theoretical consequences. And the most important one is what I said first. I mean, so far there have been the Schrödinger and all the molecular biology idea. Life is based on the laws of physics and chemistry. The reality is that life is based on arbitrary rules. And that's a big change. Okay? The genetic code was made of arbitrary rules, and without the genetic code there would be no life. So, code biology is going to I mean, the codes exist, and one day biologists will recognize them. What we have to do, what the new code biology has to do, is to reinforce, underline the experimental basis, the experimental evidence that proves the existence of so many codes. Okay, we need to provide the basis where the experimental evidence exists. That will be the task of the new. So far, code biology has been, in a way, a theoretical thing. From now on, it will be still a theoretical thing, but based on experimental facts. And that is the big change that is going to make the difference. Okay? That's it.
Time for discussion.
First of all, thank you, Marcello, for this election, and I will do my best to embed the experimental results in a theoretical part. We are, I guess, in a very good way in doing this since you founded and the whole field of code biology, and I hope that you will, as a honorary president, guide us and sort of monitor the situation, and because your experience is the best we have since basically you also have so much experimental experience with ribosomes and other biophysical findings that it is a logical step forward in building a society further. This part is also, in my opinion, in a way deficient in modern bioinformatics because of probably historic reasons and they simply forget about the codes and the theoretical part of it. Anyway, I hope that for years to come we will progress in that direction, and thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Marcello, for all these years and all these wonderful experiences. And also we have many friends, and scientifically we came forward as well. And thank you very much. And you are staying with us, of course. So, but I wanted to say, yes, actually it's very good news. Lutz will tell tomorrow a little bit more detailed. We have now some progress in the area of the, you know that Robert Prince, he gathered a list of biological codes. You announced as a database, and so we spoke, a few of us, last year a bit about the classification of biological codes, and we proposed for the German Research Foundation just such a small pre-step, because the bigger step will follow, we hope. And we've got this small grant for the classification of biological codes. Lutz will tell tomorrow a bit more detailed, and Robert prepared already also some documents about this. It's also your ideas, and it's a great idea, will be developed. So, thank you.
Yes, hello. I just would like to, well, there are ideas I would like to discuss maybe after noon, this afternoon at 3 o'clock, but I just for curiosity, in your recent...
Can you speak more clearly?
Yeah, here? Is it louder now?
Right.
Okay, sorry, it's just far away. In your recent book, I felt, I'm not sure whether it's correct or not, but I felt there is a big change in your views on the nature of language, especially in the code view of language. I mean, the change is that the code view of language is really just languages, contains, as you said, codes, but not itself a code. And that's a big change. I mean, if we track the history, and this is where I will go into details later probably, the history, I mean, within code biology, the concept of...
the important point is that there are two big phases in the development of language.
Okay.
The first one, the interaction between the and the mother, is a semantic step.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one, many years later, is a syntactic step. While so far language has been based on syntactic, Chomsky and the grammar and so forth, in reality, the very first step is semantics, semantic meaning. Aristotle.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't want to discuss the details because I don't want to take time up, maybe later at 3 o'clock, but I just would like, just curiosity, I mean, is it, it's not there, I mean, the code view of language anymore, really. Is it worth calling it the code view of language if language is not a code anymore? I mean, that's just, is it worth calling the code view of language, really?
The code view of language is a metaphor which has been, which has ruled linguistics for, at the beginning, so forth, you know, reducing language can be explained by codes and so forth. And then it has been abandoned progressively, and basically the change has been from semantics to syntactic and so forth. my view of language is not a code view of language. Because, as I said, there are three different types of natural convention. There are codes,
Yeah.
there is interpretation, and what we now call languaging, the process by which the mother and child interacts and try to give meaning to sounds. And that's the essence. There is no grammar there between mother and child. There is no syntax. There is just the attempt to create meaning. And that is the beginning of it. And that is a process that is not a code one.
I see.
So when we say code biology, and I said the third thing is that there are three different types of natural conventions. And codes are just one of them. The first, codes have ruled life for 3,000 million years. A big chunk. Basically, codes have made life.
Yeah, I see. This is the latest version of actually code biology views on language. But the code view of language was presented just 2 years ago as a counterpart to the syntax view of language against Chomsky.
But it depends. What do you call, what do you mean by the code view of language?
I mean...
Do you mean that language is reducible?
No, I'm not
to
defending
codes?
anything. I'm just saying that 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, the code of view of language was presented as language as a cultural code. That was the view. And now it seems that we are moving away from even...
Oh yeah, but that has never been the code biology view.
Yeah, but...
it has been a standard view against which the linguists have reacted and have rejected.
Yes.
And in the end, they have ended by reducing language to syntax.
Maybe we disagree in the history of
and that's, you know,
okay,
that's another mistake.
Yeah, okay. Okay, maybe later we'll discuss it with more details. Thank you.
But please, the code view of language as the traditional version is not code biology. Huh? Has never been. It has never been. The code view of language is an established traditional view of language which has been popular for a long time at the beginning, you know, reducing. But against me there has been a reaction. But it's never been a code biology view.
Sorry. It has always been a code poietic view. And it makes a huge difference because then it's not only based on codes, but also the conservation and creation of codes. So the poiesis, I think it's very key.
In my opinion, the great news about the origin of language is that the first period, the crucial period, is not a syntactic period, it's a semantic thing. And it is a sort of interaction, again, which cannot be reduced to codes. It's a new form of natural conventions, if you want to. So there is a difference between what I call the code view of language in respect to the traditional view. The traditional view now, which is based on syntax, Chomsky and that sort of thing, is the second phase of language. The beginning, the real beginning of language lies in that interaction between child and mother, which is a mixture of interpretation, codes, etc. And it is a new form of semiosis, of arbitrary rules. But again, the beginning of language is semantics, trying to give meaning to sounds. It's not syntax. Syntax comes much years later. That is a code view of language, if you want, okay? Okay, bye.
I think that this partial shift from theoretical to empirical work in the future years, I think it's part of the evolution of the society, of our society, but it's also, I think, related to your last book, because it seems really that you reached a kind of theoretical systemation of code biology in the last, I mean, many things were already in the 2015 book, but this one has a clear picture, let's say, or a bigger picture. And maybe this is also the reason for the empirical work, because maybe the theory now is partially complete, we might say, or at least we have a sketch of the general theory, and that's where empirical work can help to fill the gaps, let's say, in the great picture.
Right. I gave my contribution, I wrote my books, and that sort of thing. Okay, fine. But remember, code biology is the result of thousands of people working on experimental things, okay? That is, I mean, there is no incompatibility between the contribution of a single man who tried to put it together and eventually the experimental proof, which is the result of thousands of people working on that thing. That is really the basis of code biology. The thousands of experiments which have been done and the thousands of people who have contributed to them. Those are the real makers of code biology, okay? So I did my bit with my books and my thing, but keep in mind that the substance, the experiments, includes thousands of people. And that's the whole, thousands of people whose work is not yet acknowledged. That is the strange contradiction, you know, with these hundreds of codes. They are not acknowledged in the university books. There are no university courses on them, and so forth. So keep this in mind. Code biology is based on the work of thousands of people. That's the important point. That's the experimental basis. And then, of course, there must be some way of bringing them together and providing a theoretical framework. And that has been the first in the kind of in the field of the codes themselves, which I said they are responsible for the first 3 billion years of life. And then we come to animal interpretation, which is a different sort of thing, and in the end to language, where code biology goes back to Aristotle. You know, language is the association of sounds with meaning. That's the essence. Oh, okay, fine. But keep this in mind. Code biology is based on the experimental work of thousands of people. We are trying to put together we are trying to build a theoretical framework that includes them. All right?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes. Okay, we are in time. Okay, no other questions. Thank you very much. The last talk this morning is by Barbara Yurkova and co-workers. Do you need slide, PowerPoint? Okay. You have it already? Okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you again. Some of you we already met last year. And this year I brought Lukáš with me. You were asking after him. And we are presenting some ideas we had during the year. And if you don't mind, we will stand too, because it's quite weird for us to sit while doing the talk. So we're from Olomouc, and we're going to talk about mechanism and something a little bit sci-fi to a certain degree. So just don't mind the B and L, it's just for us to remember which slide is whose. And just a quick outline. We will talk about the concept of self-reproduction in von Neumann and Wiener, the different kinds of models that have statics and dynamics, because the probe is still the same. And we will look into how von Neumann works with the idea of evolution. Usually people are familiar with the component D and its potential and the Hall equations by Howard Patti. But also, since we both are, we have degree in history, I look into some ego documents like letters and diaries. And the theory of evolution by von Neumann is kind of unfinished, but it was there since the beginning. And in the end, we will focus on how it can be useful to the new mechanisms and extended mechanism in code biology.
Yeah, so we would like to start with Marcello's view of the relation between code poiesis and autopoiesis. So we think it's quite interesting and very important when we are talking about von Neumann and Wiener. And there is a nice paper from 2012 about this relation, and one important thing that we could say that the code poiesis is a condition or precondition for autopoiesis, but not vice versa. So there is something like sometimes the lack of the next ability to evolve another code, and then the evolution stops. And it's interesting to compare with Howard Petty's view of the role of the von Neumann machine or universal constructor, because he also thought that there is some condition for the effective autopoiesis, and this is the condition of the existence of symbolic constraint, he says, but we could say this is the necessity of the existence of the prescription of the code. So this is the first thing. So the effective autopoiesis, according to Petty, or according to von Neumann, as Petty interprets him, is the existence of symbolic constraint or code. And then there is the second thing, which Petty calls like the condition for effective evolution, and this is something like the plasticity of the machine, or the ability to evolve. And the question for us is, what is the real relation between this code poiesis and evolution? Because it seems to us that for Petty, there is something like the simple identification of the code poiesis and evolution. But it seems to us that for Marcello and maybe plenty of code biologists, there is some key difference between code poiesis and evolution.
Now, the mechanistic explanation in code biology is known because Marcello Barrera is working with the mechanism, and it's quite different from the new mechanistic philosophy. If you're familiar with it, the main difference is the models. Both are model-based explanation and theories. But when it comes to the new mechanistic philosophy, they're kind of strict. You have to have the real models. You don't they don't count with thought experiments and other things. So you have to have something real to touch and use it as a model. In mechanistic explanation in code biology, there's a place for experimental thoughts, mostly Gödel and Turing. It's still no place for von Neumann, at least now. But since von Neumann probe is quite based on Turing and Gödel and these kind of works, it's possible to just like wiggle a little bit inside and find a loop. And these two quotes are something quite similar. The first one is by Marcello In fact, understanding something means explaining it with a model that we are familiar with, and a machine gives us an immediate sense of familiarity. That's from 2015. And if you look on the second quote by John von Neumann, it was written in the letter to Norbert Wiener. That's the reason why we start tinkling with the idea of the two in 1946. And it's basically the same. Von Neumann is saying that understanding the organism in the exacting sense in which one may want to understand a detailed drawing of machine, ergo finding out where every individual nut and bolt is located, etc. And it's very important to look at it because usually when we talk about von Neumann probe, we take it quite seriously as it's like machine and it's a model. But von Neumann was working since 46 at least with the idea that he's doing the probe and the whole universal constructor just to fit some idea to use it to help us understand the organisms. At the time, we are talking before Crick and the whole DNA and MRI when it comes to the brain. They just wanted something, and they were working with the idea that it's this just model. And it's really close, the quote by John von Neumann, to not only new mechanistic philosophy, but also to some degree to the extended mechanism that is used in code biology.
Yes, firstly, when I realized that Marcello is using this mechanistic approach, it seems to me quite ridiculous or strange, but then there was some kind of conversation, and I realized that there is something like a new kind of mechanism, this extended mechanism, when the meaning is taken like a new observable and a new quantity. So this kind of quantification of meaning is interesting and is a central part of the idea of extended mechanism. And our initial thesis from the last year was that even this von Neumann invention about the role of code is something like the minimal condition for or the simplest model of Marcello's extended mechanism in code biology. And we can see that this could be so because even in the case of von Neumann, there is not the need of determination, physicalism, or something like reduction. There is a new way of talking about machine using a code. And of course, it's a modeling, as Barbara already said.
Now, this is something you are probably familiar with, maybe mostly from last year or the paper you wrote about it. But these two equations are not by von Neumann, they were done by Harry Petty. However, von Neumann operated with the symbols, and we're going to see it later in the letters and other things. And the first is quite easy. This is autopath, it's just a self-reproduction. From A, you make another A that's a similar, identical in every possible way. The second equation, it's quite interesting because they add D component. And now, usually this is the most problematic part because adding something, usually people start talking about it, it's crucial and it has to be there. But the D is just tabula rasa. It's there, and when you need to use it, you can use it. But you can still do the same self-reproduction, just A to A, without even touching the D. It's just there, hanging out, waiting for some new informations, probably some news from the surrounding that the probe can build itself, because then you don't have something. It's just kind of slight touch of evolution. And it can be automate, it can be new, basically machine or function. It depends on what we need at the time. Because usually authors are focused on one thing. Either it's automate, and it's just doing the same thing that A and B and C is doing, or is a function something like completely new. The biggest problem that usually people have with von Neumann is that there is a potential that the existence of those set of codes in the system is conditional. You need it. There is no way how to do the loop around it, and it's problematic. But since formal systems could deal with it, like Turing and Gödel, I think that even with von Neumann, we can just say it's there, it's crucial, but we can deal with it our way. And this is our thesis we proposed last year, that the von Neumann probe is minimal sufficient model of Barbier extended mechanism, because we can still work with it. Now, this is, because I'm a PhD student, of course I have lots of time to do weird stuff. So I went through the correspondence of von Neumann with Wiener, and I went with few years of correspondence just Norbert Wiener. And the first, 1966, this is the year that theory of self-reproducing automata was published by Bergs. Von Neumann was dead at the time. And at this book, if you are familiar with it, it's quite for engineers. There is very strictly detailed description of how to build the probe, it is possible. And it's focusing on the component D and its work inside the potential evolution. But in 1946, when probably the whole idea started to getting big for von Neumann, there's a question how to even think about evolution. The first example is that they can rigorously prove it in the style in Turing, which is quite true because the whole probe is based on Turing's work. But the second explanation, the second here, you can see that it's basically talking about biology seems to emphasize some variants of self-reproductive investigate on purely combinatoric grounds as well, and other phenomena. But for us, the most important part is this. Because, autopoiesis, self-reproduction is A to A. But von Neumann was thinking, what it looks like A to B to C and back to A. Meaning that you are using the component D to this point, and then you just cut it off, and it becomes 8 again. Or you can focus that it's 2 generations after each are still the same without any evolution begin. Or you can go back, even in the middle steps, like go back to C, to the 3rd step. And this is what von Neumann is, I think it is the last thing that he wrote to Norbert Wiener in 1946, the last paragraph in it. And it's just starting the idea how it actually works, what can be done with it, and other things.
Yeah, this is just a just an intermezzo, because we tried, or Barbara tried to find out some other sources where some relation between Marcello Barbier's view from semantic theory of evolution and von Neumann's view is or exists, and she realized that these two guys in 1998 made something like identification of von Neumann probe with Marcello's vision about the relation of genotype, ribotype, and phenotype. So this is just as I said, an intermezzo, like a nice point where we can find the first relation between this extended mechanism of Marcello and von Neumann, universal constructor. And now, when we go from von Neumann's theory of self-reproducing automata to Wiener's cybernetics, we can realize that in the, I think it's a last, no, it's not last chapter, but one of the final chapters of his cybernetics, even published in 40s, is devoted to self-propagating machine. So he's not using the term self-reproducing or self-replicating, but self-propagating. And from one point of view, it's not any huge difference, because still there is a need of a code, and there is a need of the description and this double set. But the difference is in the dynamics. So it seems to us that Wiener is really thinking about this probe or universal constructor as something active, as an agent. So it's something which evolves in time. So for von Neumann, it's still a kind of engineering prescription in the book, but for Wiener there is something like we should to ask how the probe will behave time after time, step after step, and it's an agency, and it propagates itself. So it is able not only copy itself or make a reproduction of itself, but to create a new copy with the same functions. So this is something where we think the important difference between Wiener and von Neumann is, and later you will see that even in the correspondence we will find something to this point. And yeah, there was an intermezzo, now in a comment. Wiener was probably very interesting, or maybe too much interesting person, and he was thinking about plenty of things. Maybe you know about his relation to Bertrand Russell as his inspiration. When he was a student, he tried to study logic. He has some important invention in logic also in the beginning of 20th century. But he then skipped the relation with the logic, and he was quite anxious to logical positivism, and he was trying to think about logical proof, like about something which is even dynamical. So when Gödel or Turing or even von Neumann are thinking about logical machine, they are still thinking about something abstract, like a mathematical thinking experiment. But Wiener is thinking about something real machine which is working in time, and when he thought about logical paradoxes, then he realized that, for example, the paradox of Russell or Cantor, which goes to the machine like an infinite cycle, is something like the inability of the machine to reach equilibria. So he is thinking really about the machine like a dynamic system, or like something which is really in time. And this is even expressed in the alternative solution to the Russell's paradox, where he says that we do not need only type theory, but we can use something like parameterization using time parameters and making the logical proof a dynamic system.
Okay, so this is basically what Lucas said, that we have still the same probe. There is not probe that Wiener did. It's just the difference how to look at it. When you are working with von Neumann, it's purely combinatorial. You have parts, you have screws, you have nuts, and it's a complicated structure to enable self-reproduction to be among its function. It's a static model. It's nothing more, nothing less. It's just a static model. But when it comes to Wiener, he really started using the dynamic model, and it's really based on learning. He's talking about specific machines like non-linear transistor to just show that it's possible. But in the end, what's important is that input and output are two different functions of time, and output is completely determined by input. This is learning that the machine, be it self-propagating or others, in this case self-propagating, is learning itself how to do the propagation. And it's really depend on the time and process. This means that Wiener is already working with the loops and with the back loops, and giving the something to work on. So it's really moved from the static model of self-reproduction and self-propagation to something actually dynamic that can be useful to a certain degree. I'm not sure if you can see it, but these are again two letters. The first one is from Norbert Wiener to John von Neumann, when basically Wiener is saying that von Neumann should use some controlling functions and controlling devices, and how to work with something like automata and the probe itself. Because the probe isn't just idea in a vacuum that von Neumann came with. It's a long-term process, and he was discussing it not only with Norbert Wiener but with others. So there are so many little parts. And in the second one is a letter from, is an answer from John von Neumann, that he knows about it, he was thinking about it, but he's trying to let it a little bit go, not to focusing on the details, because Norbert Wiener was all about the details, about even weird details, but John von Neumann just wanted to focus on what's actually important to him.
Yeah, as Barbara said, about the learning and the importance of learning in cybernetics and in Wiener's view of self-propagating machine. Wiener is doing, this is not from 40s, this is from the 1961, some comparison between learning in the case of ontogenetics and with the learning in the case of phylogenetics. And he thinks that, he thought that he can investigate these waves in brain and to realize how learning is emerging like a self-organizing system or something such. It sounds a little bit crazy today, but he was thinking about ontogenetic learning like something like self-organization. But for the phylogenetic learning, so for the evolution and for the propagation of code, he was thinking like something as a phylogenetic learning and using this self-propagating machine. And and it seems to us again that it was quite similar in von Neumann, but only implicitly present in the component D. So maybe a small invention of us is that we are able to identify the component D in von Neumann and to making some connection to Wiener's visions.
Now, a little bit of history, dear Norbert, and your Johnny. If you are seeing Johnny and Norbert, they're really familiar with each other, and there are many evidences of them talking about many things, and these two. And this is again from the letter from 46, that they should start thinking with simple systems. They are talking about the probe, about the self-propagation probe, and Wiener is trying to do something with more cybernetics, and John von Neumann is trying to get him back into the thinking about cells. Mostly, we're gonna see later the bacteriophage, and just trying with a simple systems like the cells and other things. And they are thinking about the biology. They want to apply the probe to biology at least at the time what they know. Here, you can see that von Neumann is proposing to trying to understand the system, not only through the models itself, but they are focusing on how to build something. Von Neumann was engineer, so you can see the 1,000 or in the 100,000s and the large numbers and his propositions. But they are focusing on bacteriophage because they thought it was going to lead us something different. But still, it remains the point. They were talking actively about it, and they were talking actively about biology and what it means to them. And this is basically our new proposition that we are applying what Wiener was doing with cybernetics and psychology and learning and stuff, to add it to the whole things with von Neumann probe. Here's familiar with Johnny's probe because we are working with it constantly. And trying to do it this way, trying to introduce it to the, not only the new mechanism, but also to the extended mechanism, and actually try to wider the extended mechanism for the code biology itself. Okay, so that's all for us. Here are some references, and thank you for your attention.
Fine, thank you very much. We have time for open discussion and pose questions, if there are.
It's lunchtime, we get it.
No, Marcello? Yeah? Yes, please.
Nobody wants to ask, then I would. Could you tell me, please, is it important for the distinction between machines and systems? Is it of relevance for you, or you would treat them as synonyms?
I'm sorry, I'm a bit tired on here.
Okay. Is the distinction between machines and systems is of relevance for you, or you're treating them as synonyms?
I'm personally thinking of synonyms.
Okay.
But I'm a student, I can do a lot of things. My professor is trying to push me towards one thing.
Okay, we can ask him then.
I think we can say that we can conceive the machine as a kind of system, but of course the term of systems is a much richer
So when we are talking about dynamic systems, then we can say that the machines or the formalization of machines could be seen as a kind of system. If this is the answer which satisfies you.
Machine is part of a system, is a tools, or what is the function inside the system? I insist about this argument. Have you understood my question?
When I'm thinking about systems, I see the dynamic systems theory. So very general view when the system could be plenty of things, when we have a kind of abstract space and some quantities which we can make a variation on transformation with them. So in this case, the machine could be realized as a kind of system and on the abstract level. I really don't want to monopolize. I think it was an important, so what Wiener was aiming at and where he was basically moving with cybernetics is that so his criticism of if the machine works according to the logical rules, it will run into trouble of different kinds. Yeah, either Gödel's paradox or Russell's paradox, or maybe the Barber's paradox. Yeah. So he was aiming that at the thing that you can't really have self-replicating thing, which would work according to the algorithm and still produce the new life without occasional disturbances. And those disturbances will accumulate. So that's why basically, so the thermostat could be programmed with the feedback that you referred to stay in the equilibrium. But you probably can't program it to externally to produce new things which produce new thermostats. So basically I think the system theory was or cybernetics, for that matter, as a kind of intermediary step, was made to show that machines would work according to some algorithm which is specified in advance, but sooner or later will run into trouble, and then some non-logical decisions environment-based decisions would be needed, and that's where systems will come. So that's why I was kind of prodding you on the distinction. Are other questions?
Well, it's not so closely related to your talk, but I mean, it's regarding the problem of self-propagation. I mean, has there been any change in thought in response to the rich environment we have now, provided by the internet and communication mechanisms? I mean, it's obviously there are self-propagating viruses, and it's like suddenly we have a rich medium for bacteria to evolve and get rid of many fancy things, where the environment does essential task of self-replication, and it becomes more important to exploit the dissemination channels efficiently and all this. I'm just wondering whether, this idea of an isolated self-propagate machine is still timely.
This? Fine. Yeah. As we said, so we are thinking about it partly historically, so it's interesting for us from the historical point of view. But when we still believe that this relation between Gödel's view of the paradox, or not paradox, but about the problem of formalization, Turing's view of the machine, von Neumann's view, and then Wiener's view,
points to something very important: the existence of code in the simplest way. So, from this point of view, it's for us still really very timely, because we are trying to understand what extended mechanism is. But from the point of view of the evolution of technology, of course, it's something really historical and some part of a museum of ideas. But we are happy when we can go to the historical documents and try to find some nets of ideas which are important for us today.
Okay. No other questions?
And the thing, when it comes to the all documents, what I have personal problem with is that Phonema Pro is usually for us, for modern scientists, understand theory, views, maybe usually from Harvard's faculties, that not so many people go to the original one. Not too many people look into the origins of the idea, and they are just interpreting someone else's work, and something is lost. And when you look into the ego documents, I know this is not just a professional for the biology and things like this, and not everyone has the time to look into it. You find that they are thinking differently about it that we are interpreting right now. Something accumulated, something happened between the interpretations. So we are just trying to put the puzzle pieces together, not only to fit our theory, but to fit the idea of von Neumann and Wiener and the other guys in the circle in Princeton and MIT. So that's basically it too.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. I thank every people here for the discussion and the contribution to this very interesting discussion. Now it's time for a lunch. We have no precise indication. There are many bistros in downtown. We have investigated the cost of a lunch, but less than 30 euro. You don't find nothing in common restaurants, so we cannot provide you precise indication. And I think that we must be here at 3 p.m. on time. The day is long. We have also a concert in this room at 9. So it's a long day for everyone. I thank you for your passion, and I'm really happy to assist you as possible as I can. Thank you.